Since the tragic shooting at 3 Asian-owned spas in Atlanta, hashtag #StopAsianHate has been trending. We have been bombarded with commentary from the left that attributes the recent rise in anti-Asian violence to white supremacy, Republicans, and of course former President Donald Trump. Concerning these attacks, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi recently told the Asian caucus,
"White supremacy is the biggest bucket of concern when it comes to domestic terrorism."
Representative Judy Chu of California stated,
"These attacks are no accident. It's clear January 6th was not the only violence Donald Trump incited."
And according to one CNN article, white supremacy and hate are haunting Asian Americans. Is this true? Should Asian Americans like myself fear violence at the hands of white supremacists? Are Republicans and Donald Trump to blame? Not so fast. Take the Atlanta shooting. A white man kills 8 people, including 6 Asians. We can all agree that this was a horrific attack, a tragedy inflicted by one deranged man. But instead of waiting for the facts to come out, instantly, before the bodies were even cold, the mainstream media and the Democrats screamed racism. A torrent of outrage ensued. Instantly, we were bombarded by thousands of Stop Asian Hate posts, lengthy articles, and news panels discussing how much white people hate Asians and why white supremacy is to blame. However, the suspect also murdered 2 white victims and injured a Hispanic victim too. If he were a white supremacist, why would he have done that? He also admitted to a sex addiction, not racism, that drove him to commit these crimes. Even FBI Director Christopher Wray denied that the crimes were racially motivated. But that didn't matter. Democrats used this tragedy to fit their race-baiting narrative. They got the Asian community all riled up against white Americans. And the Stop Asian Hate promoters raised a ton of money for their left-wing causes. Contrast this with another horrific news story. 2 teen girls charged with murder and carjacking death of Uber Eats driver. The man was a 66-year-old Asian Pakistani immigrant. And it was all caught on camera. Where was the outrage? Where was the outcry about Asian hate? CNN framed it like this. Police said the girls, 13 and 15, assaulted an Uber Eats driver with a taser while carjacking him, which led to an accident in which he was fatally injured. An accident? It was a murder. DC Mayor Bowser tweeted out, not condolences for the victim, but this. Auto theft is a crime of opportunity. Follow these steps to reduce the risk of your vehicle becoming a target. And the story barely made a ripple on the left. The Stop Asian Hate promoters didn't seem to be too outraged either. But why? Because it didn't fit their narrative. The perpetrators were 2 black teens. Now, these are just 2 of the latest crimes against Asians. You may have seen other videos and news stories of attacks against Asians, especially the elderly. As an Asian American myself, whose 90-year-old grandmother lives in Chinatown in LA, I've been horrified. An 84-year-old Thai American was murdered in San Francisco. A Filipino American's face was slashed in New York City. A 64-year-old Vietnamese grandmother was robbed in San Jose, and an elderly Asian woman was punched in the face in San Francisco. That could have been my grandmother. What's extremely frustrating about reading the news coverage is how left-wing journalists and Democrats instantly give us the same old tired narrative, white supremacy. But look a little further and you find out that a lot of the perpetrators aren't even white. The data does not in fact support their claim. Asian journalist Andy Ngo pointed this out by citing statistics from the Department of Justice. Here is the data on violent crimes against Asian victims. In 2018, 27.5% of perpetrators were black, 24.1% were white, 24.1% were Asian, and 7% were Hispanic. While blacks only make up 13% of the US population, they were in fact the biggest group committing these crimes. An Asian is more likely to be assaulted by another minority than they are by a white person. Now that's an inconvenient truth that totally debunks the whole narrative. Furthermore, if you look at where these crimes were committed, a lot of them are in blue cities like New York, San Francisco, and San Jose. Not exactly MAGA country. These criminals are most likely not hanging on every word Donald Trump says. But blaming Donald Trump for everything and anything is the go-to tactic of the left. Asian Americans shouldn't fall for it. The fact that Trump called the coronavirus the China virus is not inherently racist. The mainstream media was calling it the Chinese coronavirus and the Wuhan virus for months. No one was crying racism when they were doing it. And that is how diseases have historically been named, from the place where it originated, whether it's Ebola, the West Nile virus, the Zika virus, SARS, or Lyme disease. It's a fact that the novel coronavirus came from Wuhan, China. Trump was merely holding the government of China accountable for starting the pandemic, and that was the point he was making. China is not our friend. The Chinese Communist Party is the worst human rights abuser in the world. I was born in China, I am Chinese. But I'm not offended because I have enough critical thinking skills to understand that Trump was talking about the Chinese government and not about the Chinese people or Asian Americans like myself. Crying racism is merely a tactic the left uses to control our words. So, I implore my fellow Asian Americans to not get swept up in all this America-bashing white supremacy narrative that we're hearing from the left. Racism exists, but it doesn't only go one way from the white man to everyone else. And look, I've experienced racism, and America has not always lived up to its ideals. But America is so much less racist today than the Democrats want us to believe. Their hyper-focus on race and the supposed crisis of white supremacy is only dividing us. The fact is, millions of Asians would never have immigrated here if America was so bad, so racist, and so oppressive. We fled truly oppressive totalitarian regimes. And the truth is, Democrats are merely exploiting these recent events when it suits them. It's only to help them politically. We are merely pawns in their political game. And what's their solution? Critical race theory, more equity, affirmative action, and defunding the police? These are policies that are destructive and inherently racist and disproportionately hurt Asian Americans. And come on, the leftists tell us we shouldn't even be considered people of color. In their words, we are white adjacent. We're too successful to even be considered oppressed in their intersectional hierarchy. So forgive me if their selective concern about racism against Asians isn't taken seriously by me. Yes, let's stop Asian hate. But the left's white supremacy narrative is a lie that needs to be rejected.